He lay there, eyes closed, heart pounding, pretending to sleep, while the shy maid he'd hired just days ago moved through his study. Ethan Rollins, the richest man in Wyoming Valley, had become a spy in his own home. What he discovered that winter night in 1891 would shatter every wall he'd built around his grief-stricken heart. But first, he had to stay perfectly still and watch what she did when she thought no one was looking. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The grandfather clock in the corner struck 9, its chime echoing through the empty corridors of the Rollins mansion like a death knell. Ethan sat in his leather chair, staring at nothing the way he'd done every evening for 3 years. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, but he didn't move to stoke it. Cold had become familiar. Cold was honest. "Mr. Rollins." The voice was so soft he almost didn't hear it. He turned his head slowly as if the movement required great effort and saw her standing in the doorway, Clara Bennett, the new maid. She was thin as a rail, her brown hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt her hands clasped in front of her worn gray dress. "What is it?" His voice came out harsher than he'd intended, but he didn't apologize. He'd forgotten how. I just wanted to know if you needed anything before I retire for the evening, sir." She didn't meet his eyes. She never did. "No." She nodded once quick as a bird and started to turn away. "Wait." She froze, shoulders tensing as if expecting a blow. Ethan stood, his joints stiff from sitting too long. He was only 34, but grief had aged him. "How long have you been here now?" 4 days, sir." 4 days. It felt like longer. Her presence had disrupted the rhythm of his loneliness in a way he couldn't quite name. The house was too clean now. There were flowers in vases he didn't remember owning. The smell of baking bread had replaced the scent of dust and regret. "And you came from Ohio?" "Yes, sir, Columbus." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you leave?" For the first time she glanced up at him, and he saw something flash in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or fear. "My father's business failed, sir. He took his own life. My mother passed from grief 6 months later. There was nothing left for me there." The words were delivered without emotion, but Ethan recognized the flatness. It was the same way he spoke about his own losses, as if feeling nothing was safer than feeling everything. "I'm sorry," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. "Thank you, sir." She curtsied, an old-fashioned gesture that seemed to belong to another century, and left. Ethan returned to his chair, but this time he couldn't settle. Her story circled in his mind like a vulture. An orphan like him, alone like him, running from ghosts like him. He wondered if that's why Mrs. Henderson, his housekeeper, had hired her, misery seeking misery's company. He picked up the ledger he'd been pretending to review and tried to focus on the numbers. The ranch was thriving, 20,000 head of cattle, 300 horses, contracts with the railroad that would make him twice as rich by next year. His foreman, Jack Sullivan, ran the operation with brutal efficiency. Money poured in like water, and it meant absolutely nothing. His eyes drifted to the portrait above the mantel. Margaret, his wife. She smiled down at him with that gentle expression she'd worn like armor against the world's cruelty. Beside her, in a smaller frame, was their daughter, sweet little Rose, who'd lived only 2 years before scarlet fever took her. 3 years ago this February. 3 years of breathing without living. A sound from the kitchen pulled him from his thoughts, soft singing barely audible. He set down the ledger and moved to the hallway, careful to keep his footsteps quiet. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and through it he could see Clara. She was standing at the sink washing dishes and humming a hymn he recognized from childhood, "Come thou fount of every blessing." His mother used to sing it while she worked. The memory hit him like a fist to the chest. Then Clara began to speak, her voice low and earnest. "Lord, I don't know if you're listening to someone like me, But if you are, please watch over Mr. Rollins. He's carrying a weight I can't even imagine. I see it in his eyes, all that hurt, all that loneliness. I know what it's like to lose everything, but he's lost even more. His whole family gone, and he's still here trying to keep going even when it must feel impossible. Ethan's hand gripped the doorframe. I don't know how to help him, Lord. I'm just a maid. I clean his house and cook his meals, and most days he doesn't even look at me. But maybe that's enough. Maybe just being here, making sure he eats, keeping the cold out. Maybe that's what you want me to do. I pray it is, because I have nowhere else to go, and he needs someone, even if he doesn't know it yet. She paused, and Ethan heard the sound of water being wrung from a cloth. Bless him with rest tonight. Help him find peace just for a few hours. Let him dream of happier times. He deserves that much. Amen. Ethan backed away from the door, his heart hammering. He returned to his study in a daze, collapsing into his chair. When had anyone last prayed for him? When had anyone seen his pain and tried to ease it? Expecting nothing in return, he sat there for a long time, listening to the house settle into silence as Clara finished her work and retreated to her small room off the kitchen. The fire died completely. The room grew cold, but Ethan didn't notice. Something had shifted. Some sealed door in his chest had cracked open just a hair, and light was trying to get in. The next morning, Ethan woke from the first dreamless sleep he'd had in months. He dressed quickly and went downstairs to find breakfast already laid out: eggs, bacon, fresh bread with butter and jam. Clara was nowhere to be seen, but he could hear movement in the laundry room. Mrs. Henderson appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a stout woman in her 50s with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that had run the household since Margaret's death. "Morning, Mr. Rollins. Sleep well?" "Well enough." He sat down and picked up his fork, then set it down again. "Mrs. Henderson, what do you know about Clara, about her character?" The housekeeper's eyebrows rose. "Clara Bennett. She's a good girl, sir. Hard worker, honest. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." He picked up the fork again, studying the eggs without eating them. "She seems different." "Different how?" He struggled to put it into words. "Gentle, in a world that should have hardened her by now." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened. "Some people, sir, they go through fire and come out soft instead of hard. They decide the world's got enough cruelty without them adding to it. I think Clara's one of those." Ethan nodded slowly. "Where did you find her?" "She answered an advertisement I placed in the Columbus paper. Her references were impeccable, worked for a judge's family before her circumstances changed. When I met her, I could see she was desperate, but not the dangerous kind of desperate, the surviving kind." "The surviving kind," Ethan repeated. "Yes, sir, the kind that keeps going even when there's no good reason to. I thought—" She hesitated. "I thought maybe you'd understand that." He met her eyes, and in them, he saw a concern that went beyond employer and employee. Mrs. Henderson had known Margaret, had helped her through Rose's birth and death, had watched Ethan retreat into himself afterward. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson." She nodded and left him to his breakfast. But Ethan couldn't eat. His mind was racing with an idea that was either brilliant or insane. He couldn't decide which. He wanted to know more about Clara Bennett, wanted to understand what made her pray for a stranger, wanted to see who she really was when she thought no one was watching, and he knew exactly how to do it. That evening, Ethan positioned himself in his study the same way he had the night before, sitting in his leather chair, ledger open on his lap. But this time, when 9 o'clock approached, he let his head fall back against the chair. He slowed his breathing, relaxed his features, and waited. Footsteps in the hall, soft, hesitant. The door creaked open. "Mr. Rollins." Clara's whisper was barely audible. "Sir." Ethan kept his breathing steady, his eyes closed. He heard her move closer, felt her presence beside his chair. She stood there for a long moment, and he wondered what she was thinking. Then he felt something soft settle over his shoulders, a blanket tucked gently around him. "You work too hard," she murmured, her voice achingly tender. "Driving yourself into the ground won't bring them back. I wish you could see that." She moved to the fireplace, and he heard the sound of logs being added, the poker stirring the embers back to life. Warmth began to spread through the room. Through the slits of his barely open eyes, he watched her work. She moved with quiet efficiency, tidying the papers on his desk without disturbing their order, dusting the shelves, adjusting the portrait of Margaret so it hung perfectly straight. Then she did something that made his breath catch. She stood before Margaret's portrait and spoke to it. "Mrs. Rollins, I never knew you, but I can see you were beautiful, not just in your face, but in your eyes. They're kind. I bet you took good care of him, didn't you? Made him laugh. Made this house a home." Clara's voice cracked slightly. "He misses you so much. Sometimes I catch him staring at your picture and the look on his face. It breaks my heart. I don't know if you can hear me wherever you are, but if you can please help me help him. Show me what he needs. I'm trying, but I don't know if it's enough." She reached out and gently touched the frame, then turned away. Ethan's chest felt like it was being crushed. No one had spoken to Margaret since she'd died. No one had acknowledged her as anything but a memory. But Clara treated her like a person still present, still capable of caring for those she'd left behind. Clara moved to leave, but paused at his desk. She pulled something from her apron pocket, a small tin, and set it down carefully. Then she was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind her. Ethan waited a full minute before opening his eyes. He threw off the blanket and went to the desk, picking up the tin. It was beeswax salve, the kind ranch hands used for rope burns and cracked skin. A small label in careful handwriting read, "For your hands." He looked down at his palms. They were rough, calloused from the work he still insisted on doing himself sometimes. He'd stopped noticing the small cracks and cuts that came with handling leather and wood, but Clara had noticed. He opened the tin, and the scent of honey and herbs filled the air. It was simple, practical, the kind of gift that said, "I see you suffering even in the small ways you don't mention." Ethan sat down slowly, the tin clutched in his hands, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt tears burn behind his eyes. He repeated the test the next night, and the next. Each time Clara came to check on him, believing him asleep. Each time she revealed more of herself. The third night she brought a book, a worn copy of poetry, and read aloud in a whisper while she worked. Wordsworth. "I wandered lonely as a cloud." Her voice gave the words a sweetness he'd never heard before. The fourth night she mended a tear in his jacket that he hadn't even noticed, her needle flashing in the firelight as she hummed that hymn again. The fifth night she prayed again, but this time the prayer was different. "Lord, I'm starting to care for him more than I should, more than is proper. I know my place. I'm his servant, nothing more. But when I see him suffering, it hurts me too. Is that wrong? Am I overstepping? I don't want to presume anything. I don't want to make his life more complicated, but I can't help wanting him to be happy again, to smile, to live instead of just existing." Ethan's hands gripped the arms of the chair so hard his knuckles went white. "Please don't let me be a burden to him. If these feelings I'm having are wrong, take them away. Let me serve him faithfully without wanting more than I can have. And if there's any way I can bring even a moment of joy to his life, show me how. That's all I want. Just to see him happy even once. Amen." When she left that night, Ethan sat in the dark for hours. He was a fraud, a coward, testing her sincerity while hiding his own awakening feelings. Because that's what they were, he realized with growing clarity. Somewhere between her prayers and her kindness, between her gentle voice and her selfless heart, he'd begun to feel again, and it terrified him. A week into his deception, Ethan made a discovery that changed everything. He'd gone to the kitchen late one night, unable to sleep, seeking the whiskey. He kept in the cabinet there. The house was dark, everyone asleep. But as he passed Clara's room, he heard crying. He stopped his hand on the cabinet door, listening. It was quiet crying, the kind meant to be hidden muffled by a pillow or a hand pressed to the mouth. The kind he'd done himself in the early days, after Margaret and Rose died. He should have walked away, should have given her privacy, but he couldn't. He knocked softly. "Clara." The crying stopped instantly. Silence. Then, "Mr. Rollins, I'm sorry, did I wake you?" "No, I couldn't sleep." He hesitated. "May I come in?" Yes, sir." He opened the door carefully. The room was tiny, barely large enough for the narrow bed, a dresser, and a small table with a candle. Clara sat on the bed, still fully dressed, her face wet with tears she was frantically trying to wipe away. "I apologize, sir. I didn't mean to disturb." "You didn't." He stepped inside, feeling oversized in the small space. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, sir. I'm fine." "You're crying." "It's nothing, just memories. They come sometimes at night." Ethan knew that truth intimately. He pulled the single chair from the table and sat down, still maintaining a respectful distance. "Tell me." "Sir, I couldn't." "Please." Something in his voice made her look up. Their eyes met, and in hers he saw all the loneliness he felt reflected back at him. "Today is my mother's birthday," she said finally. "She would have been 46, and I'm here in a stranger's house trying to make a new life, and she's gone. They're both gone. And sometimes the weight of it it crushes me. I try to be strong. I try to remember my blessings. But tonight you just miss them." "Yes." The word was a broken whisper. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "February 17th. That's the day Rose died. Scarlet fever. She was 2 years old. Margaret followed her 3 weeks later. Same illness. I watched them both fade, and there was nothing I could do, nothing but hold them and pray to a God who didn't seem to be listening." Clara's hand went to her mouth. "Mr. Rollins, I'm so sorry." "So I understand." He continued, his voice rough. "I understand the weight, the crushing, the nights when it all feels like too much. And I understand trying to be strong when you feel broken into pieces so small you'll never find them all again." They sat in silence, two damaged souls acknowledging each other's wounds. "How do you bear it?" Clara asked finally. "I don't know that I do. I just keep going, because stopping seems like surrender, and I'm too stubborn to surrender." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "My father used to say that stubbornness was a virtue if you aimed it the right direction." Sounds like a wise man. He was, until the world broke him. Ethan stood slowly. He should leave. This was inappropriate, a man in his maid's bedroom in the middle of the night. If anyone knew, her reputation would be destroyed. His too, probably, though the world cared less about men's reputations. But he didn't want to leave. For the first time in 3 years, he was having a real conversation, saying true things, feeling something other than numbness. "Thank you," he said. Clara looked up confused. "For what, sir?" "For reminding me I'm not the only one who's lost everything, for being honest about the pain. Everyone else treats me like I'm made of glass, afraid to mention Margaret, or Rose, afraid to acknowledge what happened. But you see it. You understand." "Because I carry it too," she said softly. "Yes." He moved to the door, then paused. "Clara, the things you do, the prayers, the kindness, the small gestures, you think, I don't notice they matter more than you know. So thank you for that too." Before she could respond, he left, closing the door gently behind him. He didn't go to the kitchen for whiskey. He didn't need it anymore. The next day, Ethan couldn't concentrate on anything. He tried to work on the ranch books, but the numbers swam before his eyes. He tried to ride out to check the herds, but turned back halfway there. His mind was full of Clara, her tears, her honesty, her lonely little room. That evening, he found himself watching her as she served dinner. Really watching her for the first time. She moved with unconscious grace, her hands sure and gentle as she set down plates and poured water. When she smiled, a rare occurrence, it transformed her entire face, making her beautiful in a way he hadn't noticed before. She caught him staring and blushed quickly, looking away. "Is something wrong with the roast, sir?" "No, it's perfect." He hesitated. "Everything you cook is perfect." The blush deepened. "Thank you, sir." "Ethan." She looked up, startled. "Sir?" "My name is Ethan. You can use it when it's just us." "I couldn't, sir. It wouldn't be proper." "Proper," he repeated, something bitter in his tone. "I'm tired of proper, Clara. Proper kept me locked in grief for 3 years. Proper keeps people at a distance when what I need is connection. Just try it, please." She bit her lip, clearly torn. Then, so softly he almost didn't hear it. "Ethan." His name in her voice did something to him, cracked something open wider. "There, that wasn't so hard, was it? No S, Ethan." She smiled slightly, and he felt an answering warmth in his chest. Mrs. Henderson bustled in with dessert, breaking the moment. But as Clara retreated to the kitchen, Ethan caught her glancing back at him, something cautious and hopeful in her eyes. That night he pretended to sleep again, but this time when Clara came in, he was more aware than ever of the deception. It felt wrong now, dishonest. She was opening her heart to him in the light. Why was he still hiding in the dark? She covered him with the blanket as always, but this time she did something new. She knelt beside his chair so close he could smell the lavender soap she used, and she laid her hand gently on his arm. "Ethan," she whispered, testing his name the way he'd asked her to. "I hope you're finding peace in your dreams. I hope you're with them again, even if just for a little while. And when you wake up, I'll still be here. For whatever you need, I promise." Then she did something that stopped his heart. She leaned forward and pressed the lightest kiss to his forehead, barely a touch over in an instant. "God keep you safe," she breathed. And then she was gone. Ethan sat frozen, his mind reeling. That kiss, innocent, tender, achingly pure, had undone him completely. The test was over. He couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't hide behind closed eyes and false sleep. Clara Bennett had seen him at his worst and loved him anyway, not because of his money or his name or his power, but because she recognized his suffering and chose to ease it. The question was, what was he going to do about it? He stood up, the blanket falling to the floor, and stared at the door she'd just passed through. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. Every instinct told him to be careful, to protect himself, to retreat back into the safety of loneliness. But a stronger instinct, one that had been dormant for 3 years, was finally waking up. It was telling him to stop hiding, to stop testing, to step into the light and take the risk of living again, even if it meant his heart might break all over again. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He paced his room until dawn, wrestling with himself. Part of him wanted to confront Clara immediately, to tell her he knew everything, to ask her what this was between them. But another part, the part still scarred by loss, was terrified. What if he was wrong? What if her kindness was just that kindness, nothing more? What if he revealed himself and destroyed the fragile connection they'd built? Worse, what if they did pursue this feeling and he lost her too? He couldn't survive another death. He couldn't bury another woman he loved. Love. The word stopped him mid-pace. Was that what this was? Already after only 2 weeks, but he knew deep in his bones that it was, or at least the beginning of it, the seed of something that could grow into love if he let it. Clara had planted that seed with her prayers and her gentleness and her understanding. It had taken root in the barren soil of his heart, and now it was reaching for the sun. The question was whether he was brave enough to let it grow. As the sun rose, painting his room in shades of gold and pink, Ethan made his decision. He would tell her, not today. He needed to find the right words, the right moment. But soon, he would step out of the shadows and into the light, and whatever happened next, at least he would have tried. At least he would have lived. He dressed and went downstairs to find Clara already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. She looked up when he entered, surprised. flickering across her face. "Ethan, you're up early." Couldn't sleep. He leaned against the doorframe watching her work. "Clara, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you come here? I mean, really. You could have found work in Columbus. Stayed near what was familiar. Why travel all the way to Wyoming?" She was silent for a moment, her hands stilling over the bowl of eggs she was whisking. "Because I needed to be somewhere where no one knew me as that poor Bennett girl. Somewhere I could start over without everyone's pity following me like a shadow. And because—" she hesitated. Because I read about you in the newspaper, about your wife and daughter, about how you'd become a recluse in your grief, and I thought maybe someone who'd lost everything would understand. Maybe working for someone like that, I wouldn't have to pretend to be all right when I wasn't." Ethan's throat tightened. "You came here seeking understanding." "Yes, selfish, I know." "No." He pushed off the doorframe and moved closer. "It's not selfish. It's human. We all need to be understood." She met his eyes, and in that moment something passed between them, an acknowledgement, a recognition. Two lonely souls finding each other in the wilderness. "I should finish breakfast," Clara said finally, breaking eye contact. "Yes, of course." But as he left the kitchen, Ethan knew that something had shifted again. They were dancing around each other now, both aware of the pull between them, but neither quite brave enough to name it. Not yet. But soon. The days that followed moved like honey, slow, sweet, and somehow inevitable. Ethan found himself inventing reasons to be wherever Clara was. He'd linger over breakfast, asking for a second cup of coffee he didn't want. He'd work in the study with the door open, listening for the sound of her footsteps in the hall. At night he'd abandoned the pretense of sleeping, but he couldn't bring himself to confront what was happening between them. Not yet. The fear was still too strong, but Clara was changing too. He saw it in small ways, the way she'd pause when she passed him, as if wanting to say something but holding back. The way her eyes would find him across a room and linger before she remembered herself and looked away. The way she'd started humming more often little melodies that filled the silent house with something that felt dangerously close to joy. Mrs. Henderson noticed. Of course she did. "You're smiling more," she said to Ethan one afternoon, cornering him in the hall outside his study. "Am I?" He tried to keep his voice neutral. "Don't play coy with me, Mr. Rollins. I've known you since you were courting Miss Margaret. I know what a man looks like when he's interested in a woman." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm not judging. Lord knows you deserve some happiness after all you've been through, but be careful." Her voice softened. "That girl's heart is tender. She's been through her own hell. If you're just lonely and looking for comfort, leave her be. But if you're serious—" "I don't know what I am," Ethan admitted. "I just know that when she's near, I can breathe again. And when she's not, the house feels empty in a way it didn't before." Henderson studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "That's as good a start as any, I suppose. Just be honest with her and with yourself. That's all I ask." She walked away, leaving Ethan standing in the hallway, her words echoing in his mind. Be honest. It sounded so simple, but honesty required courage he wasn't sure he possessed. That evening, as Clara was clearing the dinner dishes, Ethan made a decision. "Clara, wait." She paused, a plate in each hand. "Yes. Tomorrow's Saturday. The ranch hands have the afternoon off. I thought, would you like to go riding? I could show you the valley. If you ride, that is." Her eyes widened. Yes, I can ride. My father taught me when I was a girl, but Sir Ethan, is that appropriate, me going riding with you? I don't care about appropriate anymore. I care about—" He stopped himself, the words too much, too soon. "I care about not spending another day trapped in this house, and I think you might feel the same." A smile bloomed on her face, small but genuine. "I would love that. Thank you." After she left, Ethan sat alone in the dining room, his untouched whiskey glass in front of him. His hands were trembling. He'd just asked her on what amounted to a courting ride, the kind young men took young women on when they were testing the waters of romance, the kind he'd taken Margaret on a lifetime ago. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. He looked up at Margaret's portrait hanging in its place of honor above the sideboard. "Forgive me," he whispered, "Pumpad. I'm not trying to replace you. I could never replace you, but I'm so tired of being alone, and God help me, Margaret, she's bringing me back to life, and I don't know if I'm betraying you or honoring you by letting it happen." The portrait, of course, didn't answer, but in the flickering candlelight, Margaret's painted smile seemed almost peaceful, as if giving permission, or maybe that was just what he wanted to see. Ethan drained his whiskey in one burning gulp and went to bed. He dreamed of Margaret that night, but for the first time it wasn't a nightmare. She was sitting in a field of wildflowers, Rose playing at her feet, and when Ethan approached, she looked up at him with love in her eyes. "You're allowed to be happy again," she said, her voice as clear as if she were really there. "I want you to be happy. Promise me you'll try." He woke with tears on his face and the absolute certainty that tomorrow would change everything. The morning arrived bright and cold, the kind of February day that promised that spring was coming even if it hadn't arrived yet. Ethan was up before dawn, unable to sleep, his nerves jangling like spurs. He dressed carefully, not his work clothes, but not his Sunday best either, something in between. He wanted to look presentable without seeming like he was trying too hard. When he came down to breakfast, Clara was already there, but she looked different. She'd worn a riding skirt he'd never seen before, dark blue wool, simple but well made, and she'd loosened her hair slightly so soft curls framed her face. She looked younger, lighter, beautiful. "Good morning," she said, and he could hear the nervousness in her voice that matched his own. "Good morning. You look... That's a good riding outfit." "Thank you. It was my mother's. One of the few things I kept." She touched the fabric self-consciously. "I hope it's not too worn." "It's perfect." They ate breakfast in near silence, both too anxious to make conversation. Mrs. Henderson watched them with knowing eyes but said nothing. After the meal, Ethan led Clara out to the stables where he'd already had Jack prepare 2 horses, Thunder, his black gelding, and Daisy, a gentle chestnut mare with a sweet temperament. "Daisy's good with riders who haven't been in the saddle for a while," Ethan explained. "She won't give you any trouble." Clara stroked Daisy's nose and the mare nickered softly. "Hello, beautiful girl. We're going to be friends, aren't we?" Ethan watched her with the horse and felt something in his chest expand. She had a natural gentleness with animals, the same gentleness she showed everything and everyone. It made him want to protect her from every harsh thing the world could throw at her. They mounted up and Ethan led the way out of the stable yard and toward the open valley. The ranch spread out before them, rolling hills covered in winter grass, stows of cottonwood trees following the creek lines, and in the distance the mountains standing like sentinels against the sky. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed. "It is. I forget that sometimes. When you see something every day, you stop really seeing it." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the horses walking side by side. Ethan kept glancing at Clara, watching the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the way she sat the horse with unconscious grace, the way wonder and peace warred on her face. "Tell me about your father," he said finally. "What was he like before things went wrong?" Clara was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then he was brilliant, inventive. He had ideas for machines that could make farming easier, manufacturing faster. He spent everything we had developing his patents, believing they would change the world. And maybe they would have if he'd had more time, more money, but his investors pulled out when the panic of '88 hit. He lost everything in a matter of weeks, and he couldn't recover. He tried. God, he tried so hard, but the shame of it, the failure, it ate him alive. He started drinking, stopped sleeping. My mother and I watched him disappear piece by piece until there was nothing left but a shell. And then one morning I found him in the barn. She stopped, her voice breaking. Ethan reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to say it. He'd hanged himself. she finished, barely a whisper. There was a note. It said he was sorry, that he'd failed us, that we'd be better off without him. Clara, I'm so sorry. The worst part is he was wrong. We weren't better off. My mother died of a broken heart 6 months later, and I was left alone trying to figure out how to survive in a world that suddenly made no sense. They rode in silence again, but now Ethan was holding her hand, and she was holding back, their fingers intertwined between the horses. It was improper, scandalous even, and Ethan didn't care. My wife died believing I could save her, he said quietly. Rose got sick first, scarlet fever. The doctor said there was nothing to be done but wait and pray. Margaret nursed her day and night, barely sleeping, barely eating. And when Rose died in her arms, something in Margaret broke. I saw it happen. It was like watching a light go out. Clara squeezed his hand. She got sick 3 days later. Same fever, but I think part of her wanted to go, wanted to be with Rose. She fought for a while for my sake, but in the end, she just let go. And I was left standing there helpless. All my money, all my power, and I couldn't save either of them. You can't save people from death, Ethan, only from loneliness, from despair, from giving up. He looked at her sharply. Is that what you've been doing for me? Saving me from giving up? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe you've been doing the same for me. They stopped the horses at the top of a rise that overlooked the entire valley. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and snow from the mountains. Clara's hair whipped around her face, and Ethan resisted the urge to brush it back. Can I tell you something? Clara asked. Anything. When I first came here, I was planning to stay only long enough to save money to move on, maybe to California. Somewhere warm where the past wouldn't follow me. But now, she looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Now I don't want to leave. And it's not because of the job or the house or even Mrs. Henderson's kindness. It's because of you. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Clara, let me finish, please. She took a shaky breath. I know it's wrong. I know my place. But every night when I see you sitting alone in that study, drowning in grief, something in me breaks. And when you smile those rare times, you actually smile, something in me mends. I don't know what to do with these feelings. I've never felt this way before. You've never been in love before. Ethan said the words escaping before he could stop them. She flinched. I didn't say, but you are, aren't you? Because I am. I'm in love with you, Clara Bennett. God help me, I've been falling in love with you since the night I heard you pray for me in the kitchen. And I've been too much of a coward to admit it until now. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan, we can't. You're a wealthy rancher and I'm your maid. People will talk. They'll say terrible things. They'll say I seduced you for your money, that I'm taking advantage of your grief. Let them talk. You don't understand what it's like to be the subject of scandal. It will destroy any chance I have at a decent life. Then marry me. The words hung in the air between them, shocking them both. Clara stared at him, her mouth open, her eyes wide. What? Marry me, Ethan repeated. And now that he'd said it, the rightness of it settled into his bones. I know it's too soon. I know we've barely known each other 2 weeks, but I also know that I don't want to spend another day pretending I don't feel what I feel. I don't want to waste more years hiding from life because I'm afraid of losing again. I want to live, Clara, and I want to live with you. Ethan, you're not thinking clearly. This is grief talking, or loneliness, or it's love talking. I love you. I love your gentleness and your strength. I love the way you pray when you think no one's listening, and the way you care for everyone but yourself. I love that you see my pain and don't run from it. I love that you make this empty house feel like a home again. I don't know what to say. Say yes, or say you need time, but don't say no because you think you're not worthy. You're the worthiest person I've ever known. Clara wiped her tears with shaking hands. I'm afraid. What if this is a mistake? What if you wake up one day and realize you've made a terrible error? What if we're happy? Ethan interrupted. What if this is exactly what we both need? What if God brought you here not just to save me, but to save yourself, too? She laughed through her tears. You sound like a preacher. Maybe I've been listening to your prayers more than you know. She sobered, searching his face. You heard me in the kitchen. He nodded, guilt washing over him. I heard you. That first night and several nights after. I'm sorry. I should have told you, but I was testing you, trying to understand if your kindness was real. It was wrong of me, but you heard everything. Her face had gone pale. All my prayers, all my confessions. Yes. Even when I said I was falling for you. Yes. For a long moment she just stared at him. Then unexpectedly she started laughing. Not bitter laughter, but real amusement that rang out across the valley. What's funny? Ethan asked, bewildered. I was so careful, so proper. I tried so hard not to let you see how I felt. And all along you knew everything. You heard every foolish word. They weren't foolish. They were beautiful. She shook her head, still smiling. I should be angry with you, spying on me like that. I know, I'm sorry. But I'm not. Because if you hadn't been listening, you wouldn't have known. And we wouldn't be here right now, and you wouldn't have just asked me to marry you. Her smile faded. Did you mean it truly? With everything I have. Clara dismounted from Daisy, and after a moment, Ethan did the same. They stood facing each other, the horses grazing peacefully nearby, the wind carrying away their breath in small clouds. My answer is yes, Clara said quietly. But not yet. Ethan's heart sank. Not yet. Give me time. Let us court properly. Let me be sure this is real and not just two lonely people clinging to each other in the dark. Because if we do this, Ethan, I want it to be forever. I want to be your wife, not your bandage. And you need to be sure, too. Sure you're not just replacing what you lost. Sure I'm not just a shadow of Margaret. The mention of his late wife's name hung between them. Ethan stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in Clara's eyes. You're nothing like Margaret. You're entirely yourself. And I'm not trying to replace her. I'm trying to honor her by doing what she'd want, living again, loving again. She wouldn't want me to be alone forever. How do you know? Because I dreamed of her last night. And she told me. Clara's eyes filled with fresh tears. You dreamed of her. She was in a field with Rose, and she was happy, at peace, and she told me I was allowed to be happy too, that she wanted me to be. He cupped Clara's face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear. So yes, I'm sure, but I'll wait. I'll court you properly. I'll give you all the time you need to be sure, too. 3 months, Clara whispered. Give me 3 months. If at the end of that time we both still feel this way, then I'll marry you. 3 months, Ethan agreed. And then because he couldn't help himself, because the need was too strong, and she was too close and too beautiful and too perfect, he kissed her. It was soft and tentative, a question, more than a statement. But when she kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, it became a promise of healing, of new beginnings, of love found in the ruins of old grief. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to court you so thoroughly, Clara Bennett, that by the end of 3 months, you'll wonder why you made us wait. She laughed, the sound like music. I'm counting on it. They rode back to the ranch, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Ethan told her about building the ranch from nothing, about the early days with Margaret when they were poor but happy. Clara told him about her mother's garden, about the books she'd loved as a girl, about the life she had once imagined before it all fell apart. By the time they reached the stables, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jack was there to take the horses, and his eyebrows rose when he saw their linked hands, but he said nothing. The look he gave Ethan was approving, though, and that meant something. Jack had been with him since the beginning, had mourned Margaret and Rose alongside him. If Jack approved, maybe the rest of the world would too, or maybe they wouldn't, and Ethan would learn not to care. As they walked back to the house, Mrs. Henderson met them at the door. She took one look at their faces and smiled. "So it's happened then," she said. "What's happened?" Ethan asked innocently. "Don't play dumb with me. I can see it written all over both of you. You've gone and fallen in love." Clara blushed furiously, but Ethan just grinned. Guilty as charged. "Well, praise the Lord. It's about time." Mrs. Henderson ushered them inside. "I've kept dinner warm, and Clara, after you've eaten, come find me. We need to have a talk about what's proper and what's not, now that things have changed." "Nothing's changed," Clara protested. "I'm still the maid. You're the woman being courted by the master of the house. Everything's changed, dear, and we need to make sure we do this right, so the gossips have less ammunition." After dinner, as Mrs. Henderson promised, she pulled Clara aside. Ethan tried not to eavesdrop, but he caught snatches of conversation, something about chaperones and proper distance and maintaining appearances. He smiled to himself. Mrs. Henderson was protecting Clara's reputation, and for that he was grateful. When Clara emerged from the kitchen an hour later, she looked slightly overwhelmed. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked. "Mrs. Henderson has very firm opinions about courtship. Let me guess, we're not to be alone together. I'm to treat you with utmost respect, and there will be absolutely no impropriety." "Essentially, yes. She's moving my room upstairs to the guest wing, says it's not proper for me to sleep off the kitchen anymore, and I'm no longer to do heavy cleaning. She's hiring another girl for that." "Good. You shouldn't have been doing all that work anyway." "Ethan, I need to work. I need to earn my keep. You're not a servant anymore, Clara. You're—" He struggled for the right word. "You're going to be my wife. If you still want to help around the house, fine, but you're doing it as the lady of the house, not as hired help." She looked stricken. "The lady of the house? Ethan, I don't know how to be that. I don't know which fork to use at fancy dinners or how to host parties or any of those things wealthy women do." Neither did Margaret when we first married. She was a farmer's daughter. Her father raised wheat, and she grew up with dirt under her nails and calluses on her hands. But she learned, and you will too, though honestly I don't care about any of that. I just want you. Clara stepped closer, glancing around to make sure they were alone. Mrs. Henderson said no kissing. "She's not here right now." "Ethan." He kissed her anyway, quick and sweet. When he pulled back, Clara was smiling despite herself. "You're going to get me in trouble." "Probably, but you like it." "I do," she admitted. "God help me, I do." That night, for the first time in 3 years, Ethan went to bed happy. He lay in the dark, thinking about Clara sleeping upstairs in her new room, and imagined a future where she slept beside him, where he woke up to her smile every morning, where this house was filled with laughter again, and maybe if God was kind with children. The thought of children made him freeze. Could he survive loving a child again? Could he bear the terror of watching a small life depend on him, knowing how easily it could be taken away? But then he thought of Clara's strength, her gentleness, her faith. If anyone could help him brave that fear, it was her. He closed his eyes and slept deeply, dreamlessly, peacefully. Downstairs, Clara lay awake in her new room, staring at the ceiling. 3 months. She'd asked for 3 months. It had seemed reasonable at the time, necessary even. But now, with the memory of his kiss still tingling on her lips, 3 months felt like an eternity. She thought about what Mrs. Henderson had said about being careful about protecting her reputation. The older woman meant well, but Clara knew the truth. No amount of propriety would stop people from talking once they learned the maid was courting the master. They'd say she was a gold digger, a seductress, that she'd taken advantage of a grieving man. The thought made her stomach turn, but then she remembered Ethan's words, "Let them talk." Could she be that brave? Could she stand tall in the face of judgment and scorn, knowing that what she and Ethan had was real? She had to believe she could, because the alternative, walking away from him, from this chance at happiness, was unthinkable. Clara rolled over and saw the small bag she'd brought from Ohio sitting in the corner. Inside was a photograph, the only one she had, of her parents taken on their 20th wedding anniversary. Her father looked proud, her mother radiant. They'd been so happy once. "I found someone, Mama," she whispered to the photograph. "Someone who understands, someone who's kind and hurt and trying to heal just like me. I think you'd like him. I think Daddy would too." The photograph, of course, said nothing. But Clara could almost hear her mother's voice. "Then hold on to him, darling. Don't let fear steal your joy." She closed her eyes and prayed, not just for Ethan this time, but for herself too, for courage, for wisdom, for the strength to become the woman Ethan deserved, not a shadow or a replacement, but someone new, someone whole. And somewhere in the house, in rooms separated by floors and walls and propriety, two broken hearts began the slow, tentative process of mending together. The first week of their courtship passed in a strange new rhythm that both thrilled and terrified them. Ethan threw himself into wooing Clara with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. He brought her wildflowers from the valley each morning, their stems still wet with dew. He read poetry to her in the evenings while Mrs. Henderson sat in the corner, knitting and pretending not to listen. He taught her to play chess, delighting in the way her mind worked through strategies, the way she'd bite her lip when concentrating. But the town was already talking. It started with the ranch hands. Jack had been discreet, but one of the younger men had seen them riding together, seen the way Ethan looked at Clara. By the time Sunday came around, the whispers had spread through Wyoming Valley like wildfire. The rich widower and his maid. How scandalous, how inappropriate, how utterly predictable that a man in grief would fall for the first young woman under his roof. Clara heard it first at church. She'd insisted on going despite Ethan's offer to skip it, saying she needed to maintain normalcy. Mrs. Henderson accompanied her, a formidable shield against gossip, but even the housekeeper's stern presence couldn't stop the stares and whispers. "That's her," Clara heard someone murmur behind her. "The maid who's got her hooks in Ethan Rollins." "Poor Margaret must be rolling in her grave," another voice added. "Not even 3 years, and he's already replacing her." Clara's hands trembled in her lap. She tried to focus on the pastor's sermon about forgiveness, but the words blurred together. When communion came, she walked to the front with her head held high, refusing to show how much the cruelty hurt. But when she returned to her pew, a woman deliberately moved her skirts aside as Clara passed, as if afraid of contamination. The ride home was silent. Mrs. Henderson's jaw was set in a hard line, her hands gripping the reins tighter than necessary. When they reached the ranch, Clara went straight to her room without a word. Ethan found her there an hour later, sitting by the window, with tears streaming down her face. "Clara." He stood in the doorway, his heart breaking at the sight of her. "What happened?" "They hate me," she whispered. "The whole town. They think I seduced you for your money, that I'm taking advantage of your grief." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "Who said that?" "Everyone. The looks, the whispers. One woman wouldn't even let her skirts touch me, as if I was diseased." She turned to face him, her eyes red and swollen. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I am taking advantage. Maybe this whole thing is wrong, and we're both too broken to see it." "No." Ethan took her hands firmly. "Listen to me. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think. They don't know you. They don't know what you've done for me, how you've saved me. But they knew Margaret. They loved her. And here I am, trying to take her place. You're not taking her place. You're making your own place. Clara Margaret is gone. I will always love her memory, but she's gone. And I'm still here, still alive, and I have every right to find happiness again. We both do." "Do we?" Clara's voice was small, defeated. "Or is this just selfishness disguised as healing?" Ethan stood abruptly, frustration building in his chest. "Is that what you really think? That what we have is selfish? I don't know what to think anymore. Everyone's so sure we're wrong. Maybe they see something we don't." They see what they want to see. A scandal, entertainment, something to talk about over Sunday dinner. He paced the room, his hands clenched. But we know the truth. We know how this started. We know what we feel. Feelings can lie, Ethan. Grief can make us confused. Loneliness can make us desperate. He stopped pacing and looked at her, really looked at her. She was curled in on herself, her arms wrapped around her middle, as if trying to hold herself together. The town's judgment had done more damage than he'd realized. It had made her doubt not just them, but herself. "Come with me," he said quietly. "Where? Just come." He led her downstairs and out to the garden Margaret had planted years ago. It was winter bare now, just dead stalks and frozen earth. But Ethan could still see it as it had been full of roses and lavender, Margaret's pride and joy. He brought Clara to a stone bench overlooking the valley and sat down, pulling her beside him. "Margaret planted this garden the first year we were married," he began. "She said every home needed beauty, needed something that grew and changed with the seasons. When Rose was born, she'd bring her out here, let her crawl in the grass while she weeded. This was their place." Clara was quiet, listening. "After they died, I let it go. Couldn't bear to tend it. Watching things grow when they were gone, it felt wrong. So I let it die too." He gestured to the barren earth. "But then you came, and one day I caught you out here clearing away the dead plants, preparing the soil for spring. You didn't ask permission. You just did it because it needed doing. I didn't mean to overstep. You didn't. You did exactly what needed to be done. You saw something dead and decided it could live again." He turned to face her. "That's what you've done for me too, Clara. You've cleared away the dead things in my heart and made room for something new to grow. That's not selfish. That's not wrong. That's exactly what Margaret would have wanted. She loved life. She'd hate knowing I'd buried myself with her." Clara's tears fell faster now. "But what if I can't live up to her? What if I'm never enough? You're not supposed to be her. You're supposed to be you, and you are enough, more than enough." He cupped her face, making her meet his eyes. "I love you, Clara Bennett. Not because you're filling an empty space. Not because I'm lonely or confused or grief-stricken. I love you because you're kind when the world is cruel, because you see people's pain and try to heal it, because you make me want to be better than I am. That's not confusion. That's clarity." She closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling over. "I'm so scared, Ethan. Scared that we're moving too fast. Scared that the whole world is against us. Scared that I'll wake up one day and you'll realize you made a mistake. Then be scared with me, because I'm terrified too. Terrified of losing you the way I lost them. Terrified of opening my heart again and having it destroyed. But I'm more terrified of letting fear win, of spending the rest of my life safe and alone and miserable." He pressed his forehead to hers. "So let's be scared together, but let's be brave together too." For a long moment, Clara just breathed, her breath mingling with his in the cold air. Then she nodded almost imperceptibly. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They sat in the dead garden together, holding each other, and Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He would protect her from the town's cruelty, would shield her from their judgment. And when spring came, they would plant this garden together and watch it bloom, proof that beautiful things could grow from grief. But protecting her proved harder than he'd anticipated. The gossip intensified over the following weeks. Letters arrived from concerned citizens warning Ethan that he was making a fool of himself. His business associates began treating him differently, their respect tinged with pity or disapproval. Even Jack, who'd been supportive, pulled him aside one day with a warning. "Boss, you need to be careful. The men are talking. Some of them think Miss Clara is, well, that she's not what she seems." Ethan's voice went cold. "And what do they think she is? They think she's after your money, that she played you, made herself indispensable, and now she's got her claws in you." Jack held up a hand before Ethan could explode. "I'm not saying I believe it. I'm saying you need to be aware. Because if the ranch hands are talking, the whole county is talking. And that kind of talk can hurt a woman's reputation permanently. Her reputation, Ethan said bitterly. What about mine? You're a man and you're rich. Your reputation can survive anything. Hers can't. You know that. Ethan did know that. The unfairness of it burned in his gut. He dismissed Jack and went to find Clara, who was in the library, attempting to read, but mostly staring at the same page for 20 minutes. We need to make a decision, he said without preamble. She looked up startled. About what? About this, about us. The talk is getting worse and it's hurting you. So either we end this now and save your reputation, or we accelerate our timeline and get married immediately. Give them something real to talk about instead of speculation. Clara set down her book slowly. Married immediately, but we agreed to 3 months. I know what we agreed, but I didn't anticipate this level of cruelty. Clara, they're destroying you piece by piece with their gossip. I won't stand by and watch that happen. So your solution is to rush into marriage that will only confirm everything they're saying, that I trapped you, that you're not thinking clearly. I don't care what they say about me, but I do. Clara stood, her voice rising to match his. Don't you understand? If we marry now under these circumstances, I'll spend the rest of my life being known as the maid who seduced the rich widower. Our children will hear those stories. They'll wonder if their mother is really a gold digger who tricked their father. I won't do that to them. I won't do that to us. Ethan felt like he'd been punched. Children, he repeated softly. Clara froze, realizing what she'd said. I didn't mean. You think about having children with me. She looked away, her cheeks flaming. Sometimes, when I let myself dream, but that's all it is, a dream, because the reality is that we live in a world that won't accept us, that will punish us for trying to find happiness. Ethan crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. Then we make them accept us. We live so well, so openly, so genuinely, that they can't help but see the truth. It won't happen overnight, Clara. It might take months or even years. But eventually, they'll see what I see, a good woman who deserves happiness just as much as anyone else. And if they never see it, then we'll have each other, and that will be enough. Clara searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, but all she found was absolute certainty. This man, this wealthy, powerful man, was willing to face down the entire world for her. The knowledge was both humbling and terrifying. The 3 months stand, she said finally. We do this right. We court properly. We give them no ammunition. And at the end of that time, if we still feel this way, we marry. In the church, in front of everyone. Let them see that we have nothing to hide. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to protect her from 3 more months of gossip and cruelty. But he could see the steel in her eyes, the determination. She was fighting for their future in her own way, and he needed to respect that. 3 months, he agreed. But Clara, I'm not going to hide how I feel. I'm going to court you openly, publicly. Let them talk, let them judge. At least they'll know we're not ashamed. Ethan, no more hiding. That's my condition. You want 3 months, fine, but we spend them living honestly. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, no more hiding. It was easier said than done. The next Sunday, Ethan insisted on sitting with Clara in church, despite Mrs. Henderson's protests. He walked in with Clara on his arm, his head held high, and led her to the Rollins family pew, the one that had sat empty since Margaret's death. The congregation's reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Thornton, the pastor's wife, looked like she might faint. Even the pastor stumbled over his opening prayer, distracted by the sight of Ethan Rollins publicly claiming his maid. Clara kept her eyes forward, her hand tight on Ethan's arm. He could feel her trembling, but her face remained calm, almost serene. Pride surged through him. She was so much stronger than people gave her credit for. After the service, as they filed out, Mrs. Thornton blocked their path. Mr. Rollins, might I have a word? Of course, Mrs. Thornton. The older woman's eyes flicked to Clara with barely concealed disdain. Perhaps in private. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of Miss Bennett." Mrs. Thornton's mouth tightened. "Very well, the congregation is concerned about your recent choices. We understand grief can cloud judgment, but parading your servant in front of the entire town is unseemly. It dishonors your late wife's memory." Ethan felt rage building, but Clara squeezed his arm in warning. "Mrs. Thornton," Clara said quietly, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "I understand your concern for Mr. Rollins. You knew his wife and you want to protect her memory, but I'm not trying to replace Mrs. Rollins. I'm simply a woman who has found unexpected friendship with a good man in a difficult time. If that offends you, I'm sorry, but we've done nothing wrong." "Friendship," Mrs. Thornton scoffed. "Is that what you call it when a servant connives her way into her employer's affections?" "That's enough." Ethan's voice was ice. "You will not speak to her that way. Clara has shown me nothing but kindness and respect. She's helped me through the darkest period of my life, asking nothing in return. If you can't see the goodness in that, then perhaps you need to examine your own heart, not hers." Mrs. Thornton drew herself up. "I'm trying to save you from making a terrible mistake. The only mistake I've made was caring what small-minded people think." He guided Clara past the stunned woman. "Good day, Mrs. Thornton." They walked to the wagon in silence, aware of dozens of eyes on them. Only when they were moving the church receding behind them did Clara speak. "That was a disaster. That was necessary. Ethan, you just made an enemy of the most influential woman in town. She made herself my enemy when she insulted you." He reached over and took her hand. "I meant what I said in there. I don't care what they think. Not anymore." "But I do," Clara said miserably. "I care because every harsh word, every judgmental look, it makes me doubt, makes me wonder if they're right, if I am just a naive girl who's in over her head. You're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning and everyone's standing on the shore watching and no one's willing to help." Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop on the side of the road. He turned to Clara, taking both her hands in his. "Then stop looking at them. Stop listening to them. Look at me instead. Listen to me. I love you. I choose you, and nothing they say can change that. Do you believe me?" She met his eyes, and slowly the fear in her own began to recede. "Yes, I believe you." "Then that's all that matters. Let the town drown in their own judgment. We'll build our own island of happiness, and they can't touch us there." Clara managed a small smile. "You're very good with metaphors today." "I'm inspired." He kissed her hand, then her wrist, then her palm, each touch a promise. "I love you. I love you too," she whispered. "Even when I'm scared, even when I doubt, I love you." They sat there on the side of the road, the winter sun weak but warming, and held each other. In the distance they could hear the church bells ringing, calling people to prayer. But Ethan felt like they were already praying with their presence, with their courage, with their refusal to let hatred win. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of joy and pain. Ethan courted Clara with unwavering devotion, taking her on rides through the valley, teaching her about the ranch, reading to her by the fire. They talked for hours about everything, their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. Mrs. Henderson chaperoned dutifully, but even she began to relax as she saw the genuine love growing between them. But the town's hostility didn't abate. If anything, it intensified. Clara was refused service at the general store. Women crossed the street to avoid her. Even the doctor, when Clara fell ill with a winter cold, was reluctant to make a house call until Ethan threatened to withdraw his substantial donations to the town hospital. Through it all, Clara held her head high. She refused to hide, refused to be ashamed. If Ethan had business in town, she went with him. If there was a community gathering, she attended. She met every sneer with grace, every insult with silence, every act of cruelty with dignity, and slowly, imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started with Jack's wife, Martha. She'd been quiet about the whole affair, neither condemning nor supporting. But one day she brought a basket of preserves to the house and asked to speak with Clara. I wanted to apologize, Martha said, her weathered hands twisting her apron, for not speaking up sooner, for letting them tear you down without saying a word. Clara was stunned. You don't need to apologize. You don't even know me. But I know Ethan, known him since he was a young man building this ranch from nothing. And I've seen what losing his family did to him, watched him die inside while still walking around. Martha met Clara's eyes. But these past few weeks I've seen him come alive again, and that's because of you. Anyone with eyes can see the way he looks at you, the way you look at him. That's not scheming. That's love. Real, honest love. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. You don't know how much that means. There are others who feel the same. They're just afraid to say so because Mrs. Thornton and her ilk are so loud. But give it time. Truth has a way of rising to the surface. After Martha left, Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe they weren't as alone as she'd thought. Maybe there were people willing to see past the scandal to the truth underneath. That night she told Ethan about Martha's visit. He held her close, his chin resting on top of her head. See, it's starting. People are beginning to understand. One person, Ethan, one person out of hundreds. One person is more than zero. It's a start. Clara pulled back to look at him. How do you stay so hopeful after everything you've been through? How do you still believe things will work out? Because they have to. Ethan said simply, the alternative, a world where love is punished, where grief is permanent, where second chances don't exist. That's a world not worth living in. So I choose to believe, I choose to hope, and I choose you every single day. Clara kissed him, then pouring all her love and fear and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. 2 more months, she whispered. 2 more months, and I'm yours forever. You're already mine, Ethan replied. The wedding is just making it official. The next day brought unexpected news. A telegram arrived from Ethan's lawyer in Cheyenne. One of his business partners had heard the gossip and was threatening to dissolve their partnership unless Ethan came to his senses regarding Clara. The potential loss was substantial, thousands of dollars and valuable railroad contracts. Ethan read the telegram, crumpled it, and threw it in the fire. What did it say? Clara asked, worried by his expression. Nothing important. Ethan, don't lie to me. I can see it's upset you. He sighed and told her about the business partner's ultimatum. Clara's face went pale. How much would you lose? It doesn't matter. It does matter. That's your livelihood, your future. Our future, he corrected. And our future doesn't depend on men who value money over decency. I'll find other partners, make other deals, but I won't give you up to preserve a business relationship. That's not even a question. Clara sat down heavily, her mind reeling. This is getting worse, not better. The town hates me. Your business associates are turning on you. How much are you willing to lose for this, for us? Everything, Ethan said without hesitation. I'm willing to lose everything. Because without you, all of it is meaningless anyway. She looked at him, this man who kept choosing her over wealth, over reputation, over everything the world said mattered. And suddenly 3 months seemed not just long, but cruel. Why were they waiting? Why were they giving the world more time to hurt them, to tear them apart? Marry me now, she said abruptly. Ethan froze. What? You heard me? Marry me now, today, tomorrow, as soon as we can arrange it. I'm tired of waiting, tired of letting them dictate our timeline, tired of pretending that 3 months will somehow make them accept us when we both know it won't. Clara, you said you needed time. I was wrong. I don't need time. I need you. I need us to stop letting fear control us. You were right all along. We should face this together as husband and wife, not as a scandalous courtship that gives them ammunition. Ethan crossed to her, hope and disbelief warring on his face. Are you sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back. The talk will be vicious. Let it be vicious. Let them say whatever they want. We'll know the truth, and eventually, That will be enough." She took his hands. "Marry me, Ethan Rollins. Make me your wife. Let's stop hiding from our happiness." For a moment he just stared at her, as if afraid she might disappear. Then he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around. "Yes." He laughed, the sound pure joy. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Mrs. Henderson, hearing the commotion, rushed in. "What on earth is going on?" "We're getting married," Ethan announced, still holding Clara, "as soon as possible." The housekeeper's eyes widened. "But the 3 months changed our minds," Clara said, breathless from spinning and happiness. "We're done waiting." Mrs. Henderson looked between them, saw the certainty in their faces, and smiled a real warm smile that crinkled her eyes. "Well then," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I suppose we have a wedding to plan." The decision to marry immediately set off a whirlwind that left them both breathless. Ethan sent Jack to town the next morning with a simple message for the pastor they wanted to be married within the week. The response came back within hours, and it wasn't what they'd hoped for. "He won't do it," Jack reported, his face grim as he stood in Ethan's study. "Says he can't in good conscience marry you under these circumstances. Says you need time for proper banns to be read for the congregation to what object?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Let me guess. Mrs. Thornton got to him." Jack nodded. "She's been organizing the whole town against this. Says if the pastor marries you, she'll see to it that half the congregation leaves. He can't afford to lose that many members." Ethan stood and paced to the window, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Behind him, Clara sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully blank. But he could see the slight tremor in her fingers, the way she was fighting to maintain composure. "Then we'll find another pastor," Ethan said. "Nearest one is in Laramie, 30 miles. I don't care if he's in California. We'll find someone willing to marry us." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, there's more. Mrs. Thornton's got most of the town women refusing to help with any wedding preparations. No flowers, no cake, no nothing. They're calling it a moral stand." Clara stood abruptly, and both men turned to her. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "They want to humiliate us, make it so we can't have a proper wedding, can't celebrate like normal people. They want us to slink away in shame or give up entirely." "We won't give them that satisfaction," Ethan said. "No, we won't." Clara's eyes blazed with a fire he'd never seen before. "But we won't beg them either. If they won't help, we'll do it ourselves. Mrs. Henderson can bake a cake. We can pick our own flowers from the valley. And if no pastor in Wyoming will marry us, we'll find a judge. Or we'll stand in front of God and witnesses and make our vows anyway, with or without official blessing." Jack's eyebrows rose, and Ethan felt pride surge through him. This was the Clara he'd fallen in love with, strong, determined, refusing to be broken by cruelty. "There's a judge in Cheyenne," Jack offered. "Judge Morrison. He's a fair man, doesn't care much for town politics. He might do it." "Then we go to Cheyenne," Ethan decided. "Tomorrow. We'll marry there and return as husband and wife. Let them choke on their righteousness." After Jack left, Clara sagged against the desk, her momentary fire dimming. Ethan went to her immediately, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You're amazing," he murmured into her hair. "I'm angry. There's a difference. You're both, and I love you for it." She turned in his arms, her eyes searching his face. "Are we making a mistake, fighting this hard against so much opposition? The only mistake would be surrendering. Clara, think about what we're really fighting for. Not just the right to marry, but the right to choose our own happiness, to not let other people's fear and prejudice dictate our lives. If we give up now, we're saying they were right all along, that love has to bow to social convention, that grief and loss mean we don't deserve second chances." When you put it that way, it sounds almost noble. It is noble. Love always is, even when the world tries to make it ugly. Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. What will we do after when we come back married? And they're even more furious. We'll live, we'll run this ranch, we'll prove every single one of them wrong by being happy, by building a life so good they can't help but see it. He tilted her chin up to look at him. And maybe someday we'll have children who grow up knowing that their parents fought for their love. That seems like a pretty good legacy to me. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, but she was smiling. Children? You keep talking about children. Are you sure you're ready for that? After losing Rose, the question hit him like a physical blow, bringing up all the fear he'd been trying to ignore. I'm terrified, he admitted. Terrified of loving a child again and losing them. Terrified of watching you go through childbirth and something going wrong. Terrified of all of it. But I'm more terrified of letting fear steal our future. If we let what might happen stop us from living, then grief wins. Death wins. And I refuse to give them that victory. Clara kissed him, then pouring all her love and understanding into it. When they broke apart, she whispered against his lips, "Tomorrow, then. We go to Cheyenne tomorrow." The next morning dawned cold and clear. Ethan had arranged for his best carriage and had Jack prepare for the journey. Clara packed a small bag with her few possessions, including the photograph of her parents and her mother's blue dress, the one she'd worn on their first ride together. Mrs. Henderson had been up since before dawn, preparing food for the journey and fussing over details like a worried mother. "You're sure about this?" the housekeeper asked Clara one final time as she helped her into her traveling coat. "Once it's done, there's no undoing it." "I've never been more sure of anything," Clara replied. Mrs. Henderson's eyes misted over. "Then God bless you both. You deserve every happiness." They embraced, and Clara felt the older woman slip something into her pocket. Later in the carriage, she discovered it was a delicate handkerchief embroidered with Clara's new initials, CBR, Clara Bennett Rollins. The sight of it made her cry and laugh at the same time. The journey to Cheyenne took most of the day. Ethan held Clara's hand the entire way, their fingers intertwined, neither wanting to let go. They talked about everything and nothing, what color to paint the nursery someday, whether they'd get a dog, how many horses Clara wanted to learn to ride. It was the conversation of people building a future brick by brick, word by word. As the sun began to set, Cheyenne appeared on the horizon, its buildings lit by golden light. Ethan directed the driver to the Grand Hotel, where he'd already sent word ahead for rooms. They checked in separately. Propriety demanded it even now, but Ethan made sure Clara's room was the finest available. "Tomorrow morning we'll find Judge Morrison," Ethan said, as they stood in the hotel corridor between their rooms. "And by tomorrow afternoon you'll be my wife." "I'm scared," Clara admitted. "Of what? That I'll wake up and this will all be a dream, that something will go wrong, that the judge will refuse too, and we'll have come all this way for nothing." Ethan cupped her face gently. "Then I'll find another judge, and another. And if every judge in Wyoming refuses, I'll take you to another state. I'll take you to the end of the earth if that's what it takes. You're not getting rid of me, Clara Bennett." She smiled through her tears. "I don't want to get rid of you. I just want tomorrow to come so we can stop fighting and start living." "Tomorrow," he promised. "Tomorrow everything changes." They said goodnight reluctantly, and Clara went into her room alone. She stood at the window looking out over the unfamiliar city, feeling utterly displaced. Tomorrow she'd be married. Tomorrow she'd be Mrs. Ethan Rollins. The enormity of it crashed over her like a wave. She pulled out the photograph of her parents and stared at their faces. "I wish you were here," she whispered. "I wish you could meet him, could see how happy he makes me. I think you'd like him, Daddy. He's strong like you were before the world broke you. And Mama, he's gentle too. He understands pain. He knows what it's like to lose everything." The photograph, silent and still, offered no response. But somehow, looking at her parents' faces, Clara felt a sense of peace settle over her. They would have wanted this for her, would have wanted her to find love again, to build a new family, to be happy. She went to bed early but couldn't sleep. Every sound in the hotel made her jump, footsteps in the hall, voices from other rooms, the distant sound of piano music from the saloon below. She kept expecting someone to burst in and stop this, to tell her it was all a mistake, that girls like her didn't get happy endings. But morning came and no one stopped anything. Ethan knocked on her door at 8 o'clock sharp, looking nervous and handsome in his best suit. Clara wore her mother's blue dress and had pinned her hair up the way her mother used to wear hers. "You're beautiful," Ethan breathed when he saw her. "I'm terrified." "Me too. Let's be terrified together." They found Judge Morrison's office, easily a modest building near the courthouse. The judge himself was a stout man in his 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to their request without interruption, his fingers steepled under his chin. "You understand that marrying you will likely earn me some enemies in Wyoming Valley," he said finally. Ethan's heart sank. "Yes, sir." "Good. I can't stand those self-righteous hypocrites anyway." The judge stood and pulled out a ledger. "I'll marry you, Mr. Rollins, Miss Bennett, but I want to make sure this is what you both truly want, not something you're doing out of spite or rebellion or to prove a point." "It's not spite," Clara said quietly. "It's love. Simple as that." Judge Morrison studied her face, then Ethan's. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him because he nodded. "Love. Simple as that. All right then. Do you have witnesses?" Ethan's face fell. In their rush to get to Cheyenne, they'd forgotten about witnesses. "No, sir. We didn't think—" "Not to worry. My clerk and his wife can stand in. They've witnessed enough weddings to know what they're doing." He called out, and a young couple appeared from the back office. The clerk, a thin man with wire spectacles, and his wife, a plump woman with rosy cheeks and a kind smile. "Another elopement, Judge?" the wife asked, her eyes twinkling. "Seems to be. John Mary, this is Mr. Rollins and Miss Bennett. They need witnesses." Mary looked at Clara and must have seen something in her face, the fear, the hope, the desperate need for this to work, because she crossed the room and took Clara's hands. "Don't you worry, dear. The judge will take good care of you. He's married half the couples in this county, and most of them are still happy." "Most of them?" Clara asked weakly. "Well, no one's perfect," Mary said with a wink. The ceremony itself was simple. They stood before the judge's desk, the winter sun streaming through the window, and made their vows. Ethan's voice was strong and sure as he promised to love and cherish Clara for the rest of his days. Clara's voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word, her eyes locked on Ethan's as she pledged her life to his. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Clara with such tenderness that Mary dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Well," Judge Morrison said, signing the marriage certificate with a flourish, "you're legally wed now. May you have many happy years together, and may the busybodies who opposed you learn to mind their own business." They signed the certificate, Clara's hand trembling as she wrote her new name for the first time and thanked the judge profusely. Mary hugged Clara like a long-lost daughter and whispered in her ear, "Don't let them steal your joy, dear. You've found something precious. Hold on to it." Walking out of that office as husband and wife felt surreal. Ethan kept looking at the marriage certificate as if it might disappear. Clara touched her ring, a simple gold band Ethan had bought that morning from a jeweler, over and over, making sure it was real. "We did it," she whispered. "We did it," Ethan echoed, and then he was spinning her around right there on the street, both of them laughing like children. They spent their wedding night at the Grand Hotel. Ethan had arranged for a private dining room where they ate dinner by candlelight, hardly tasting the food because they couldn't stop looking at each other. Everything felt different now, weighted with new meaning. They weren't courting anymore. They weren't testing the waters. They were married, bound together legally and spiritually, and the reality of it was both thrilling and overwhelming. Later in Clara's room, their room now, Ethan stood by the window while Clara sat on the edge of the bed, both of them suddenly shy. "I've never," Clara began, then stopped, her cheeks flaming. I know. Ethan came and knelt before her, taking her hands. We have our whole lives, Clara. Tonight doesn't have to be anything but us being together. No pressure, no expectations, just us. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines worry and grief had carved there. I love you. I want this. I'm just nervous. I know, so am I. You are terrified. It's been 3 years since He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't speak Margaret's name in this moment. It felt wrong somehow, a betrayal of both women. Clara understood. She always understood. This is new for both of us then. A new beginning. Yes. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet, and slowly the nervousness melted away. They had time. They had forever. And whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The next morning they woke tangled in each other's arms, sunlight streaming through the windows. Clara studied Ethan's sleeping face, still amazed that this was real, that this man was hers. When his eyes opened and focused on her, the smile that spread across his face made her heart stutter. Good morning, Mrs. Rollins. Good morning, husband. They stayed in Cheyenne one more day, pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. They walked through the town hand in hand, bought gifts for Mrs. Henderson and Jack, and ate at a restaurant where no one knew them or cared about their story. It was a perfect little bubble of happiness, but both knew it couldn't last. We should head back tomorrow, Ethan said that evening as they packed their things. I know. Clara folded one of her dresses carefully, avoiding his eyes. I'm just not ready to face them yet, to see their judgment, their hate. They can't hurt us anymore. We're married now. What's done is done. Can't they? Ethan, hate doesn't need a reason to exist. Being married might make it worse. He crossed to her and stilled her hands, making her look at him. Then we'll weather it together. That's what marriage means, right? Facing the storms together. I suppose it does. She managed a small smile. I just wish there were fewer storms. Me too, but I'd weather 1,000 storms if it means keeping you. The journey home the next day was quieter than the one to Cheyenne had been. Both were lost in thought, preparing themselves for whatever awaited. As the ranch came into view, Clara gripped Ethan's hand tighter. Whatever happens, we don't let them separate us. Promise me. I promise. Nothing and no one will separate us. Not ever. Mrs. Henderson was waiting at the door when they arrived, and her face split into a huge smile when she saw them. Well, did you do it? Ethan held up Clara's hand, showing the ring. Mrs. Henderson, may I present Mrs. Clara Rollins? The housekeeper let out a whoop of joy and pulled Clara into a bone-crushing hug. Oh, my dear girl, welcome to the family officially. Jack appeared from the barn, took one look at them, and grinned. Congratulations, boss, Mrs. Rollins. He tipped his hat to Clara with genuine respect, and she felt tears prick her eyes. These people at least were happy for them. What's the town saying? Ethan asked. Jack's smile faded. They know you went to Cheyenne. Mrs. Thornton's been on the warpath, saying you've made a mockery of marriage, of the church, of everything decent. She's organized a petition asking you to leave Wyoming Valley entirely. Clara felt her stomach drop, but Ethan just laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. A petition? How democratic of her. Well, she can take that petition and… Ethan, Clara warned. He took a breath, controlling his temper. Let them petition. This is my land, my ranch, my home. I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. That night they had a quiet celebration dinner, just the four of them, plus a few of the ranch hands who were loyal to Ethan. It wasn't the grand wedding celebration Clara might have dreamed of as a girl, but it was filled with genuine warmth and love, and that made it perfect. As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Ethan and Clara stood on the porch looking out at the stars scattered across the vast Wyoming sky. This is our home now, Ethan said. Ours to build a life in, ours to fill with happiness. Despite everything trying to tear us apart. Because of everything trying to tear us apart. We'll prove them wrong, Clara. Every single day we'll prove them wrong just by being happy. She leaned against him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. How long do you think it'll take for them to accept us? I don't know, months, years, maybe some never will, but that's their loss, not ours. A thought occurred to Clara, something she'd been pondering since the wedding. Ethan, what if we didn't wait for them to accept us? What if we showed them who we really are instead? What do you mean? I mean, what if we opened this house, had gatherings, dinners, invited people in, let them see that we're not the scandal they think we are, that we're just two people trying to build a life together? Ethan considered this. That's either brilliant or suicidal. I can't decide which. Maybe both. But hiding away, isolating ourselves, that just confirms their suspicions. If we live openly, honestly, show them our life, maybe some of them will see the truth. And the ones who don't, then at least we tried. At least we gave them the chance. Clara turned to face him. I'm tired of being ashamed of something that isn't shameful. I'm tired of letting them make me feel small. You taught me that. You taught me to stand tall, to fight for our happiness. Now I want to fight for our place in this community too. Ethan looked at his wife, his brave, beautiful wife who'd been through hell and still believed in the goodness of people and felt his heart swell with pride and love. Then that's what we'll do. We'll invite them in, show them who we are, and if they still hate us, then we'll know we did everything we could. Clara smiled, and in the starlight she looked almost ethereal. Together, always together. They stood there under the vast Wyoming sky, two souls who'd found each other in grief and darkness, now standing in the light of their hard-won love. The battle wasn't over. It might never be over, but they'd won the most important victory. They'd chosen each other, fought for each other, and nothing the world threw at them could take that away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The town's anger wouldn't disappear overnight. But tonight, they were simply husband and wife, standing on their own land, planning their future, holding on to hope that love could eventually win over hate. And in that moment, that was enough. The first week of their marriage passed in a strange cocoon of domestic peace. Within the walls of the ranch house, they were simply newlyweds, learning each other's rhythms. How Ethan liked his coffee, how Clara hummed while she worked, the way they'd reach for each other unconsciously throughout the day. But beyond those walls, Wyoming Valley was seething. The petition Mrs. Thornton had organized gained signatures daily. Diane keepers who'd once tipped their hats to Ethan now looked away when he passed. The preacher had delivered a sermon about the sanctity of mourning periods and proper courtship that everyone knew was aimed directly at them. Even some of Ethan's business associates had sent letters expressing their concern over his hasty marriage. Clara felt the weight of it all, but she refused to hide. True to her word, she began planning their first dinner party, a bold move that made even Mrs. Henderson nervous. "Are you sure about this, dear?" the housekeeper asked, as Clara wrote out invitations at Ethan's desk. "Inviting people who've been spreading poison about you into your home." "That's exactly why we need to do it," Clara replied, her pen moving steadily across the paper. "If we only invite the few who support us, we're preaching to the choir. We need to reach the ones who doubt, who judge. Let them see us in our own home, see how we really live. And if they refuse to come, then at least we tried." Ethan walked in, saw what Clara was doing, and felt that familiar surge of pride. Who's on the list? The Thorntons naturally, the doctor and his wife, the banker, the judge who wouldn't marry us. Several of your business associates and their families. Jack and Martha, of course. Anyone I could think of who matters in this town. That's ambitious. That's necessary. Clara set down her pen and looked up at him. "You said we'd prove them wrong by being happy. Well, I want them to see that happiness. Want them to sit at our table, eat our food, see how we treat each other. Maybe then some of them will realize we're not the villains they've made us out to be." The invitations went out the next day, hand-delivered by Jack. The responses came back slowly, and most were refusals, polite but firm. The Thorntons declined without explanation. The doctor claimed a prior engagement. Several business associates simply didn't respond at all. but some said yes. Martha and Jack, of course. A few of the younger ranch families who were less entrenched in the town's social politics. The banker surprisingly accepted, perhaps because he couldn't afford to alienate Ethan's substantial accounts. And to everyone's shock, Judge Morrison sent word that he'd be passing through Wyoming Valley that weekend and would be delighted to attend. That's something at least, Clara said, trying to hide her disappointment at the low number of acceptances. She'd invited 30 people and only 8 had agreed to come. That's everything, Ethan corrected. Every person who walks through that door is a crack in their wall of judgment. We start there. The day of the dinner party arrived cold but clear. Clara had been up since dawn working alongside Mrs. Henderson to prepare a feast: roasted beef, fresh bread, vegetables from the root cellar, and 3 kinds of pie. The dining room table gleamed with Margaret's china, which Ethan had insisted Clara use. "It's yours now," he'd said when she hesitated. "Margaret would want it used, want this house filled with life again. She'd approve of what we're doing." Clara had traced the delicate pattern on the plates, feeling the weight of stepping into a dead woman's place. But she'd also felt something else, a sense of rightness, of honoring Margaret by caring for the home and the man she'd loved. As the afternoon light began to fade, Clara stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom, adjusting her dress, a new one Ethan had insisted on buying for the occasion. It was deep green, simple but elegant, and it made her feel like someone who belonged in this house, in this life. Ethan came up behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "You're beautiful, and you're going to be amazing tonight. I'm terrified I'll say the wrong thing, use the wrong fork, prove them all right about me being just an ignorant maid." He turned her to face him. "You're not a maid. You're my wife. You're the lady of this house, and you're one of the smartest, kindest people I've ever known. They should be terrified of not impressing you." She managed a shaky laugh. "How do you always know what to say?" "Because I love you, and because I believe every word." The guests began arriving at 6. Jack and Martha came first, Martha carrying a bunch of winter berries she'd gathered for the table. She hugged Clara tightly and whispered, "You've got this, honey. Just be yourself." The banker and his wife arrived next, stiff and formal, their eyes darting around the house as if cataloging everything for later gossip. Then came 2 young ranch families, the Donnellys and the Prescotts, who'd moved to the valley only a few years ago and hadn't known Margaret. They greeted Clara with genuine warmth, and she felt some of her tension ease. When Judge Morrison arrived fashionably late, he filled the room with his booming voice and hearty laugh. "Mrs. Rollins," he called out, taking Clara's hand and kissing it in an old-fashioned gesture. "You look radiant. Marriage clearly agrees with you." Clara blushed, but smiled. "Thank you for coming, Judge. It means more than you know." "Nonsense, I wouldn't miss it. Besides, I wanted to see how you young people were faring after defying half the county." His eyes twinkled with mischief. "I do enjoy a good rebellion against stuffiness." Dinner was served, and for the first hour conversation was stilted, careful. The banker's wife made veiled comments about quick courtships and unusual circumstances. One of the ranch wives asked pointed questions about Clara's family that were clearly designed to expose her lower status. But Clara answered everything with grace and honesty, refusing to be ashamed. Then Judge Morrison, bless him, began telling stories about the couples he'd married over the years. Some scandalous, some sweet, all ultimately happy. "Love doesn't follow a timetable," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I've married couples who courted for 5 years and were divorced within 2. And I've married couples who knew each other 5 weeks and are still devoted 40 years later. The heart knows what it knows, and no amount of social convention can dictate its truth." The banker's wife pursed her lips, but Martha nodded enthusiastically. "Amen to that, Judge. Jack and I knew each other 3 months before we married, and we've had 30 good years." "How did you know?" Clara found herself asking. "After only 3 months, how were you sure?" Martha smiled, her weathered face softening with memory. because he made me laugh when I wanted to cry, because he saw me, really saw me, not just what I could do for him or what I looked like, because when I imagined my future, he was in every part of it. She looked at Clara meaningfully. I suspect you understand that feeling. Clara glanced at Ethan seated at the head of the table and found him already looking at her. Yes, she said softly. I understand it exactly. Something shifted in the room then. Mrs. Prescott, the youngest of the ranch wives, leaned forward. Mrs. Rollins, I heard you were from Ohio. What brought you all the way to Wyoming? It was the question Clara had been dreading, but she answered truthfully. Loss, the same thing that brings most people to new places. My parents died within months of each other, leaving me alone. I came here hoping to start over, to find a place where I could build a new life. I never expected to find... She paused, her voice catching. I never expected to find someone who understood that loss, who carried his own grief, and who could see past it to help carry mine. The room was silent. Even the banker's wife seemed moved, her sharp expression softening slightly. Ethan spoke then, his voice quiet but firm. I was dead inside when Clara came to this house. Oh, I was walking around doing my work, but I was dead where it mattered. Margaret and Rose had taken all the light with them when they left. But Clara... He looked at his wife, and the love in his eyes was so evident that even the skeptics couldn't deny it. Clara brought the light back, not by replacing what I'd lost, but by showing me I could still feel, still hope, still live. That's not opportunism, that's not scandal, that's salvation. Mrs. Donnelly dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Martha was openly crying. Even Judge Morrison looked moved, though he covered it with a cough and a call for more wine. The conversation after that flowed more naturally. People began sharing their own stories of loss and love, of finding happiness in unexpected places. The banker admitted his own marriage had been arranged by their families and took years to grow into real love. Mrs. Prescott confessed she'd been a widow with 2 children when she married her current husband, facing similar judgment from her community. By the time dessert was served, the room felt warm, almost friendly. Clara caught Mrs. Henderson's eye from the doorway where she was supervising the serving, and the housekeeper gave her a subtle nod of approval. After dinner, the men retired to Ethan's study for brandy and cigars, while the women gathered in the parlor. Clara was nervous about this separation, worried what might be said, without Ethan there to defend her, but Martha stayed close, a supportive presence. Mrs. Prescott was the first to speak. Mrs. Rollins, I owe you an apology. I listened to the gossip, believed the worst, but seeing you and Mr. Rollins together tonight, it's clear what you have is real. Thank you, Clara said, her throat tight with emotion. I'm ashamed I didn't speak up sooner, Mrs. Donnelly then added, when they were spreading those awful rumors, but I was afraid of being ostracized too. Mrs. Thornton has so much influence. Mrs. Thornton, the banker's wife said crisply, is a bitter woman who's forgotten what it's like to feel passion for anything. I've thought so for years, but no one dares say it. Clara stared at her, shocked. This was the woman who'd been making cutting remarks all evening. The older woman met her gaze steadily. Don't misunderstand, Mrs. Rollins. I still think your courtship was scandalously brief. I still think Mr. Rollins should have waited longer before remarrying, but... She paused as if the next words pained her. But I also can't deny what I saw at that dinner table. That man loves you, genuinely, deeply loves you, and you love him the same way. That's rarer than propriety, I suppose. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but coming from someone who'd been openly hostile, it felt like a victory. Martha squeezed Clara's hand. It's starting. The tide's turning. Maybe just a ripple, Clara said. Not quite a tide yet. All tides start with ripples, dear. When the guests finally left full of food and wine, and Clara dared to hope slightly changed perspectives, she and Ethan collapsed on the sofa in the parlor, exhausted but triumphant. That went better than I expected, Ethan said, pulling Clara against his side. Mrs. Donnelly cried. The banker's wife almost paid me a compliment, and Judge Morrison told everyone we were the most sensible young couple he'd married in years. See, told you it would work? Clara laughed, but it turned into a yawn. It's a start. Only a start. Half the people we invited didn't come. Mrs. Thornton's probably organizing a counter-dinner party as we speak. Let her. We've got our foot in the door now. Some people saw the truth tonight. They'll talk. Maybe others will listen. Ever the optimist. Ever the realist who's married to a woman who makes me believe in impossible things. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down. Then Clara said softly, I went to Margaret's grave yesterday, before the dinner party. Ethan stiffened slightly. You did? I needed to tell her, to ask her. Clara struggled for words. I know it sounds crazy, she's gone, but I felt like I owed her something, an explanation, an apology, I don't know. What did you say? I told her I was trying to honor her by loving you well, by taking care of you and this house and the life she built. I told her I wasn't trying to erase her, that I'd make sure any children we had knew about her, and Rose knew the story of the family that came before. And She stopped, tears choking her. I asked her to forgive me if I was doing it all wrong. Ethan pulled her into his lap, holding her tightly. You're not doing it wrong. Margaret would have liked you, Clara. She would have seen your kindness, your strength, and she would have been glad I found you. I know it in my bones. How can you be so sure? Because in my dream, she told me to be happy. She wanted me to live again, and you've made that possible. That's not betrayal. That's honoring her last wish for me. Clara cried, then really cried, releasing all the guilt and fear and pressure she'd been carrying. Ethan held her through it all rocking her, gently whispering reassurances. When she finally quieted, she felt lighter, cleansed. I love you, she said. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I know the feeling, but we don't have to be scared anymore. We've got each other, we've got this house, this life, and now we've got a few people willing to see us for who we really are. That's more than we had a week ago. The weeks that followed proved Ethan right. The dinner party had started something. Mrs. Prescott began visiting Clara, bringing her young daughter and teaching Clara the finer points of managing a large household. Mrs. Donnelly invited them to a Sunday lunch with several other young families, none of whom seemed to care about the scandal. Even the banker's wife nodded to Clara in town one day, a small gesture but significant. Mrs. Thornton and her followers still sneered and whispered, but their power was waning. People were starting to see Clara and Ethan living their lives with dignity and love, and it was harder to maintain outrage in the face of quiet happiness. Spring came early that year, arriving in mid-March with unexpected warmth. The snow melted, the creeks ran high, and the first green shoots appeared in Margaret's garden. Clara spent hours there clearing away the last of the winter debris and planning what to plant. Ethan often joined her, and they worked side by side in companionable silence. One afternoon, as they were kneeling in the dirt together, Clara suddenly gasped and pressed her hand to her stomach. What's wrong? Ethan was on his feet, immediately, panic in his voice. Nothing's wrong. Ethan, I think I'm pregnant. Time seemed to stop. Ethan stared at her, his face cycling through shock, fear, joy, and terror, so quickly Clara couldn't track it. Are you sure? I've missed 2 courses. I've been feeling sick in the mornings, and just now I felt something. A flutter, maybe. It's early, but I think... She looked up at him, her own face a mirror of his conflicted emotions. I think we're going to have a baby. Ethan sank to his knees beside her, and Clara saw tears streaming down his face. A baby, he whispered. Clara, I'm terrified. So am I. What if something happens to you? What if I lose you like I lost Margaret? I can't survive that again. Clara took his face in her dirt-stained hands. You won't lose me. I'm strong. I'm healthy. And I'm not Margaret. This is a different time, a different pregnancy. We can't live in fear of what might happen. But Rose was a different child. Our child will be their own person with their own story. We can't predict it. We can only love them and do our best. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm going to love you both so much it terrifies me. But I'll do it anyway, because you're right. We can't let fear win. They told Mrs. Henderson that evening, and the housekeeper cried and laughed and immediately began planning, talking about cribs and baby clothes and the best doctors in the territory. They told Jack the next day, and he grinned so wide his face looked like it might split. The news spread through the valley quickly, as news always did. The reactions were mixed. Some were genuinely happy for them. Others saw it as further proof that Clara had trapped Ethan. Mrs. Thornton reportedly said it was indecent haste and predicted dire outcomes. But Clara and Ethan didn't care. They were too busy preparing for their future, too caught up in the miracle growing inside Clara. Ethan became fiercely protective, insisting Clara rest more, eat more, do less. She tolerated his hovering because she understood its source, his desperate need to keep her safe, to not lose another person he loved. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Clara bloomed with health, her face glowing, her body rounding with new life. She continued working in the garden, much to Ethan's consternation, insisting the fresh air and gentle exercise were good for the baby. By summer, the garden was magnificent roses in full bloom, lavender, scenting the air, vegetables thriving in neat rows. One evening in late July, Clara and Ethan sat in the garden as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clara's hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby move and kick. What should we name them? Ethan asked, his own hand joining hers. Not Rose and not Margaret. They deserve their own name, their own identity. Agreed. Something new, something that represents hope, new beginnings. They tossed around names, laughing at some of the more ridiculous suggestions. Finally, Clara said, "What about Dawn? If it's a girl, because she's our new beginning, our sunrise after the long night." Ethan considered this. Dawn Rollins, I like it. And if it's a boy, Samuel, it means God has heard, because God heard our prayers, our pain, and gave us this second chance. Dawn or Samuel Rollins. Ethan kissed Clara's temple. Perfect. In September, Clara went into labor. It was long and difficult, and Ethan paced the hallway outside their bedroom like a caged animal, remembering Margaret's labor, remembering the complications that had weakened her. Mrs. Henderson had to physically restrain him from bursting into the room several times. But when the baby's cry finally pierced the air, strong and healthy and indignant, Ethan nearly collapsed with relief. The doctor emerged, smiling. "You have a daughter, Mr. Rollins, and your wife came through beautifully. Both are healthy and strong." Ethan stumbled into the room to find Clara propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Meet Dawn," she whispered. Ethan approached slowly, afraid to break the spell. He looked down at his daughter, and felt his heart crack open in a way it hadn't since Rose died. She had Clara's delicate features and a shock of dark hair. When her eyes fluttered open, they were the same blue-gray as his own. "She's perfect," he breathed. "You're both perfect." Clara guided his hands, showing him how to hold the baby. When Dawn settled in his arms, looking up at him with unfocused eyes, Ethan felt something shift deep in his soul. This was redemption. This was proof that love could survive loss, that joy could grow from grief, that broken people could build beautiful things together. "Thank you," he said to Clara, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me hope again, for giving me a future." "We gave it to each other," Clara replied. "Everything we have, we built together." The news of Dawn's birth spread quickly, and this time the reactions were warmer. Even those who'd condemned Clara couldn't maintain their anger in the face of a newborn baby. Gifts arrived: blankets, booties, hand-carved toys. Some came from supporters, but others came from former critics, accompanied by stiff notes of congratulations. Mrs. Thornton never softened. She maintained her disapproval until the day she died 3 years later. But by then, it didn't matter. Clara and Ethan had built a life so full of love and purpose that one bitter woman's opinion couldn't touch them. They had 2 more children after Dawn Samuel as they'd planned, and then a surprise 3rd child, a girl they named Hope. The house that had been silent for so long rang with laughter and chaos and life. The garden flourished, tended by Clara and eventually by Dawn, who showed her mother's gift for making things grow. Ethan never forgot Margaret and Rose. Their portraits still hung in the house, and he told his children about their first mother and sister, making sure they knew the story of the family that came before. But he also moved forward, building new memories, creating new traditions, loving Clara with a depth that only grew stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan and Clara stood in the garden, Margaret's garden, Clara's garden, their garden, watching their 3 children play among the flowers. Dawn was 9 now, teaching Samuel and Hope how to make flower crowns. The sight made Ethan's heart swell. "Do you remember when we first stood here?" Clara asked, leaning against him. "When you told me about Margaret planting this garden, about letting it die." "I remember everything about those early days. The fear, the grief, the desperate hope that maybe we could make it work. We did make it work. Against all odds, against all that judgment and hate, we built something beautiful." Ethan turned her to face him, seeing the lines that time and laughter had added to her face, the silver threads beginning to appear in her hair, the contentment in her eyes. "You know what I think about sometimes," he said. "That night when I first heard you pray for me, when I was pretending to sleep and you thought you were alone. That was the moment everything changed. That was when the light started coming back. I think about that night too. How terrified I was that you'd discover my feelings. How sure I was that someone like you could never love someone like me. Someone like me, a broken man living in the past. Someone like me, a penniless maid with nothing to offer." They laughed together at how wrong they'd both been, at how love had found them anyway, despite their doubts and fears and the world's opposition. "If I could go back," Clara said, "and tell that scared girl what the future held, I wonder if she'd believe me. What would you tell her? That the richest rancher in Wyoming Valley would fall in love with her, that they'd marry despite everyone saying it was wrong, that they'd have 3 beautiful children and a life so full of happiness she'd sometimes wake up thinking it was a dream." Clara smiled up at him, and that the man she loved would still look at her 10 years later like she hung the moon. "Because you did," Ethan said simply. "You hung the moon and the stars and brought morning after the longest night of my life." Their children's laughter rang out across the garden. Dawn called out, "Mama, Papa, come see what we made." Hand in hand, Clara and Ethan walked toward their children, toward the life they'd fought so hard to build, toward the future that had seemed impossible in those dark, early days. The journey had been hard, filled with judgment, loss, fear, and pain, but it had led them here to this moment, to this perfect, ordinary evening with their children in a garden that symbolized everything they'd overcome. As the sun set over Wyoming Valley, painting the sky in brilliant golds and pinks, Ethan looked at his wife and children and felt a peace so profound it almost hurt. He'd been given a second chance at love, at family, at life itself, and he'd seized it with both hands, refusing to let grief or fear or society's judgment steal his happiness. True love, he realized, wasn't discovered in a single moment of clarity. It was rebuilt day by day, choice by choice, through empathy and patience and the courage to begin again. It was Clara praying for him when he couldn't pray for himself. It was his willingness to risk his heart again despite knowing the pain loss could bring. It was both of them standing together against a world determined to keep them apart. And it was worth every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt, because here, now surrounded by the family they'd created and the love they'd fought for, they had everything that mattered. The past would always be part of them, but it no longer defined them. Margaret and Rose lived on in memory and love, but Clara and their children were the present and future. Both truths could exist together, honoring what was lost while celebrating what was found. As darkness settled over the valley and they herded their children inside for supper, Clara looked back at the garden one last time. In the twilight, she could almost see Margaret there, sitting among the roses, with little Rose, both of them smiling with approval and blessing. The vision brought tears to Clara's eyes, but they were good tears, tears of gratitude, of peace, of knowing she'd honored the woman who came before by loving well the man she'd left behind. Inside, the house was warm and bright, filled with the sounds of family children, laughing dishes, clattering, Ethan's deep voice reading a bedtime story. This was their legacy, now built from ashes and grief and two broken hearts that refused to stay broken. This was proof that tomorrow could be better than yesterday, that love could bloom in the darkest soil, and that sometimes the greatest courage was simply choosing to hope again.